the infinite plane, on the infinite plane, stay with the infinite gang.
Okay, we are live, 11/21/2024. It's actually World Philosophy Day, which is appropriate considering we had a long multi-hour voice chat today in Discord. And if you want to participate in those, you just have to join the newsletter so you don't miss out. World Philosophy Day, celebrating Philosophy Day each day on the third Thursday of November, UNESCO. And so the theme is philosophy for an inclusive and sustainable future. We didn't really talk about that in particular, but we were talking about media and the different philosophical approaches to how we consume it. And by it, I mean not just news media, but all the entertainment and everything in between, but the merging of real and fake, the psychological ramifications of trusting the screen, the philosophical implications, and the philosophic crisis that I think that we are in collectively, where people can't tell real from fake, and then we have the emergence of this new illiteracy, what I call visual illiteracy, where you might be shrewd enough to determine if somebody's lying to you based on what they're saying, but the visual lies are the ones you can't really discern. It's like a magic show. If you're in your seat, the optical illusion is designed to fool your eye. And most of the lies that we passively take in are purely visual. We're defenseless against it if we trust the screen. But if you don't, if you suspend judgment and look for more info outside of that one source, then it's not a problem. So a lot of things to talk about today. I had a question I put up in the title of the live stream, and we have a poll. I started a poll on this. Which is more likely the entity responsible for predictive programming? Now, whatever your opinion on predictive programming, the fact of it is, it exists. Not just in the form of foreshadowing in media, games, entertainment of all sorts, but also it exists in like real-time alignments between what's on the Netflix and what's on the news. And we've been documenting the phenomenon, we've been studying it, and normal news consumers don't even notice it. Or if they do, if their attention is called to it by mainstream sources, they call it an eerie coincidence. And we have a catalog of eerie coincidences. But we have, over time, evolved an understanding, a model, you could say, of what we're really looking at, of what media is. And I think there's a bit of incredulity on the side of those who are looking at predictive programming when we try to attach it to the fake news that it seems to predict, as though it's the same entity behind both. Many will say there's no way man could be so clever as to foreshadow future fake news. It has to be a higher power. And that line of thinking has pretty much dominated this field of inquiry since 9/11, where it's just considered to be such a huge volume of eerie coincidences that there's got to be something higher at work. And that explanation worked for some time. That was kind of the built-in assumption, or that it was wizards and they're telling us what they're going to do. But that all fell apart when we realized how everything that was predicted and has been predicted is always fake. The foreshadowing in whatever platform, whatever media it shows up in, it only foreshadows fakery. And that means that there's no reason for the producers of this stuff to have to warn us about what they're going to do. Because that's one of the theories, that if they tell us, then they don't have any bad karma. Now, that's a dumb explanation in my opinion, but we have to confront all these various dead ends. The explanation of a higher power is what I'm somewhat challenging here. I know people are arriving at their conclusions on the evidence available to them, but the most recent evidence, including the real-time alignments and the political utility of every example of predictive programming and the fake news that it portends, is suggestive of something lower at work, not higher. So my poll here says, which is more likely the entity responsible for predictive programming? God, aliens, higher powers, it's mere coincidence, or the psyops department? So my contention would be that whoever's behind the propaganda in media at large is behind it. And by propaganda, we're not talking about obvious displays, of perception management, but the subtle kind. And the subtle influences are what we're describing here. We're talking about propaganda surreptitiously inserted into the entertainment to prime us for fake news that they're going to release later. Not real events. Nobody's hinting about future terror attacks. They're hinting at future simulations. So that's the poll, and so far we have some answers. 9% say God or higher powers are at fault. 0 say coincidence. 90% say psyops department. So is it man programming man, or is it God warning man about future fake events? And if so, why is God working through Hollywood directors who always have a statist, big government leftist agenda? You're going to argue that God's a leftist. And the more we research, the more we uncover the relationship between the so-called entertainment, which is all just propaganda. Entertainment's the side effect. But if we look at the deliberate synchronization between the messaging here in the entertainment realm and how it corresponds to what's in the news, both real time and in a predictive fashion, the more we examine it, the less room there is to include anything as far as higher powers, aliens, AI, or whatever the prevailing theory is. It's always vague. And my reason for pushing back against this is the same reason why I push back against the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is the result of somebody's mind being tampered with. It's a well-known phenomenon called the misinformation effect. It's created through retroactive interference by the person presenting the binary. Is it this or that? The fact that the Mandela effects are binary tells you that it can't possibly be the result of reality randomly splintering. But I spent some time debunking and understanding what the Mandela effect is and what its causes are, because the people who are wrapped up in it were caught up in a false mysticism. They falsely believed they were seeing through the matrix. And I just thought I'd do them a favor. If you have the wrong answers and the wrong model and you're being misled, the sooner you course correct, the better. And my contention is that the Mandela effect is a deliberate sabotage, a cognitive sabotage directed at anybody who might see the fake news, because it's the people who've already gone into the realm of conspiracies that are hit with this. So when it comes to synchromysticism, why would I care if somebody attributes predictive programming to higher powers rather than the people involved? Well, it's because the wrong answer is holding a lot of people who could potentially be not only researching, but breaking down in minute detail all of the various psychological operations and their connections to the directors. And moreover, when it comes to explanatory power, synchromysticism offers no answers. It offers a vague, confusing something higher. The Metascript perspective, which we bring forth here, does offer some answers. It explains that the reason why they fake the news is because fake news aggregates day by day and becomes fake history. And those who control the present, as they do through fake news, control the future and the past. And the control over the worldview globally is tantamount to a new monotheism. And the power elite have perfected the art of religion. It's a science of mind control. They've given us God constructs. They've given us a monolithic world view. And it's done through synchronizing all of the messaging. It's ubiquitous. It's monolithic. It's everywhere. And that makes sense as far as why and who. Well, it's just not only are they using propaganda in the news, but they're doing it in the movies, and they're synchronizing it in such a way that you're primed to accept all future messaging. All right, let me go through some comments. But I think it's worth debating. I think we need to talk about it. We've had 20 years to flesh out synchromysticism, and no one has arrived at anything other than these. I think they're over mystifying it. People look at, this actor said this and then this happened, mind blown. And for me, I'm like, no, evidence of fakery, evidence of manipulation. So, for example, we were looking, and look, we have a predictive model here. We're able to predict where predictive programming is going to occur. We wouldn't be able to predict God or higher powers. So that alone suggests that we're onto something. So when we were looking at the roles that Robert De Niro played right after he showed up outside of Trump's courthouse, and we located several significant roles of his where he was part of the body of predictive programming leading to the Trump head wound with specificity. We're talking Travis Bickle, who inspired John Hinckley, and how that's the basis for Joker. And as Joker, De Niro gets shot. But also in Machete, De Niro is a Trump-like senator who gets shot while giving an identical speech about illegal immigrants. And as he's rushed off the stage, Machete, the patsy, gets shot in the ear. So you have the bloody ear, the speech, multiple points of alignment here. We have many more examples to get into here, but I guess my overall point is that we have two competing models to explain predictive programming. There's the Metascript view and the mystic view, the synchromystic. And only one of them can be right. These are mutually exclusive. And in my view, the Metascript hypothesis, or whatever you want to call it, has far more explanatory power, and it does have the predictability on its side, because it involves looking at media in an entirely different way. It's a bit of a paradigm shift, because you have to decompartmentalize entertainment from future news and recognize, well, what is the role of future news? Making history. How do they make history? Well, they act out significant historic events on the world stage. And if you balk at this and think, there's no way that's possible, what did they do on 9/11? Did they not create this movie out of a variety of sources and project it onto the collective psyche as though it were real? Was it not all pre-scripted? And if something of that magnitude can be implemented and successfully pulled off, then I think we're underestimating the psyop entertainment complex to say that man couldn't possibly be behind this. Yeah, obviously, predicting the news through entertainment looks kind of like magic, but as Arthur C. Clarke wrote, any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. And I add on to this, just because it's indistinguishable from magic doesn't mean it is. And we have been working on this problem studiously, tons of us, in a very focused way. We have a pretty, I think, a strict set of guidelines, and we do have a methodology. We don't say everything is fake by any stretch, but our nuanced description of what we're looking at has led us to this conclusion, that we are looking at history telling. Our history is being acted out on the world stage like a bad reality TV show that never ends. Okay, we're joined by A. Garcia, Plain Decoded, Jungle Jim, Tyler 432, Reverse History, American Fathers, J5, Tunex. Yeah, that's the original channel. So we're back. I upgraded. We're on 8 different platforms. I got us back on the original channel. I woke up in the middle of the night and something compelled me to try to resurrect all my old channels. So I just went straight to my laptop and I tried to open each one, and it's like Google's like, oh, you've been banned. Do you want to appeal? And I actually wrote this. I said, Dear YouTube, I promise not to misinformation again. Send. And I was being sarcastic. But one by one, they've brought my channels back. The original channel, which had 7,700 subs, but they were 2,200 lost by attrition. I had another one of 500. That one's open. There's one more with 12,000. We're waiting for that. But use any channel, doesn't matter. I will be blasting on all of them. All right, joined here also by Tom Smith, Marcus, Lucid Streams, Ted Striker 2112, Friendly Ghost. Are the demons not behind the PSYOP department? Yeah, I would always ask, what's the agenda of someone trying to insert mystification when we're looking at objectivism, like an objective take on something? It's like you wouldn't bring a Bible to a conversation about climate change. You know, you're talking about science and scientific models. It's kind of non sequitur. Well, we're looking at the news and propaganda. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at advertising. But the tendency to mystify it is what I'm challenging. You know, it's like The basis for supporting the mystical explanation of fake news rests on the same shaky ground as the Mandela effect. And the facts are the facts. If we're wrong and none of this is orchestrated by man, it means that we are, I guess, in a way, reading the divinely inspired messages of the universe as channeled through Hollywood directors. And I refuse to believe that Stanley Kubrick, James Cameron, and Tom Clancy were inspired by God to warn us about future fakery in a way that doesn't tell us it's fake. I mean, honestly, the whole synchromystic explanation rests on ignoring the human component. And we can point out the humans. And as we've been doing for the last 6 months or so, really since Jordan Neely and Synchromorpheus really honed in on this, we've been correlating the psyops with the directors. Like you can find James Cameron's fingerprints all over 9/11, all over the LA riots. You can find his fingerprints on the Cop City event. And I think this is the next stage. You know, we're looking at Metascript. We're looking at, as film critics would, we're looking at the handiwork. I mean, Kubrick's fingerprints are all over the Trump head wound thing over 2020. And speaking of Kubrick, I just finished watching Dr. Sleep, which is based on, well, rather, it's the sequel to The Shining. So we'll get to that. Ted Stryker, yeah, if you need a wrench, you have to email me or comment below. Not in the chat, but comment below the video. There's no other way I can possibly get it to you. You must comment below the video. And so you don't go to the live chat, but the regular chat. If you go there, I can get you a wrench. Okay, continuing here. Joined by Shed Dog, Ears Up. J5 says, doesn't the media have a responsibility to report accurately? Is there not a moral code? Yeah, you would think. And that's the big misconception, that the media is objective and that they're presenting you with a window to the world. It's never been a window. And even if the specific individual isn't lying, he rests upon a big pile of lies. And the way they frame it is also part of the whole trick. So you could be completely honest, telling the truth, reporting that the sky is blue, but you're coming from a news agency that assumes the existence of fake nukes, fake fill in the blanks, all the fake shootings. So every fake news story, every psychological operation, everything that we figure out to be fake is assumed to be real, according to the dominant narratives through the media, and it will go into the history books. And so they're liars by default. Okay, joined by Esteban. Thanks for joining. I'll open up phones as well. Joined by Patricia Steer and Messianic Charlatan. Excellent. Yeah, so the question is, and this is on the poll, what do you think is responsible for predictive programming? God, aliens, higher powers, coincidence, or the psyops department? So we have some more recent examples, in the case of the Trump ear wound thing, where around the same time that Trump is getting his ear pierced by an AR-15 for fake, the season finale of Amazon series Batman Caped Crusader has Rupert Thorne, a Trump-esque character, having his ear cut by a boomerang in that exact same spot as a warning from Batman about next season. So now we're in Trump's next season, his next term. So that would seem like it's foreshadowing. And if you recall, on the day of the event, and this is the thing, the concurrent alignment is way more of a tell, way more of a giveaway than the predictive stuff. Because you can look at the body of predictive programming or just look at media at large and say, look, this, and this all match. And you could create a false perception, something they would consider to be the sharpshooter fallacy. And they can hide behind that and ignore what we're pointing out. But you can't make that same argument for real-time programming. Real-time alignments between what's on Netflix and what's on the news. And we have many examples of how precise the synchronization can be. One of the best examples I have is Waco, American Apocalypse, 2 days before Trump kicks off his campaign in Waco. and then we have multiple layers of connections within that documentary. We have examples of Game of Thrones. The queen dies during childbirth just as Roe v. Wade is overturned. Then we have Beetlejuice, which comes out, or it came out this summer. And in the netherworld, you have Trump, even with his lapel pin, his little flag. You have a golden looking Trump, golden suit, and he's there dead. And that's just a handful. I have many, many more. And so the case has been made for the existence of predictive programming. But concurrent programming, the only way to explain that is it's the deliberate insertion of propaganda messaging with foreknowledge. And I check out what's on the news all the time. I watch whatever's the current movie. Like 2 months ago, I watched this one that was number 1, Ruby Ridge. And in the first 2 minutes of Ruby Ridge, you have the racist police running a black man off the road, brutalizing him, robbing him. And then it goes into the story of his retribution. But right after Ruby Ridge came out, Tyreek Hill for the Miami Dolphins was rudely pulled out of his car by a bunch of cops who were insulting, demeaning, and rough. And when I saw that, it occurred, I said, Ruby Ridge. They have deliberately correlated the messaging in Ruby Ridge with Tyreek Hill. And sure enough, whenever people saw it, you look on Twitter, they're like, oh, this is just like what happened on Netflix. So these are not coincidences, but if they're not coincidences, what are they? Messages from God? Higher powers? Did a higher power align Netflix? And we have so many of these alignments that we're past the point of acting mystified, like, oh, we don't know. And I'm not predicting the actions of God or the influence of God in media. I refuse to accept that I'm looking at the fingerprints of the gods just all over the propaganda. No, we're looking at specific propaganda messaging, most of it favoring the leftist or government-centric view against, or rather, statist view. Even the BLM messaging, intrinsic in Ruby Ridge, that is connected to Tyreek Hill. So if you're going to say that man's not behind it, that government's not behind it, then you're left to explain, well, why does the universe have a leftist agenda? And this is consistent. The propaganda messaging also suggests a human hand. But I'm interested in other people's thoughts, and if you're still stuck on man couldn't do it, we should talk about that. Okay, continuing here. World stage. Oh, white noise. See, that's a great one. So white noise comes out, and even the media had to acknowledge it because it happens to be about a train derailing in Ohio, toxic airborne event. The movie White Noise precedes the real thing happening in East Palestine, Ohio, and many of the extras from the movie had to be evacuated from their homes because it happened for real. And this was, they said, life imitates art. No, psyops imitate art. And that's one of these instances where the media had to acknowledge it. And then you have all the examples from Leave the World Behind. And the great thing about Leave the World Behind, as an example here, is that before it even came out, I'm like, look, this movie is higher grounds. It's the Obamas. It's going to contain foreshadowing for events that happen after the movie's released. And one news story after another, things with Boeing, things with Tesla, it all came true. And people constantly use that as their frame of reference, which further underscores my point. The fact that the public would say, oh, it's just like Leave the World Behind, means the propaganda is working because it's about creating associations. 9/11's happening. Oh, it's just like Independence Day. Yeah, it's working. They want these associations. And I was looking at the scene where Machete gets shot in the ear when he's shooting the Trump-like guy. And I went to that clip on YouTube. And there were people there on July 13th. One of them was like, this is Trump's point of view 30 minutes ago. Other people like, oh, you saw it too. So people have associations going back 15 years, 14 years when that movie came out to what just happened in the news. So that shows you that the predictive programming works. It is your frame of reference for the fake news event that it foreshadows. It absolutely works. And there's nothing random about it. So no, it's not random. No, it's not coincidence. But no, it's not a higher power. It's the same people that fake the news, the same agenda. And it's how they implement their fake history. Joe Santo, the cargo ship and leave the world behind. Yeah, good connection. Lucid Stream says we could be looking at an AI takeover Earth that started a long time ago. Yeah, the reason I reject that is that nobody was talking about AI controlling this until recently. And ChatGPT is a glorified search engine. And every time we say it's AI, an alien, God, demiurge, we're distracting from the directors. Like, we can actually rely on the facts that are available to us. We can reverse engineer scripts, and we can remove plausible deniability, and we can rule in and rule out those who may or may not be responsible for this or that particular event. I don't think we need to rely on mysticism anymore. That's a whole different category, unless you're a mystic. But if you're a mystic, I would ask for the evidence. Like, give me one example of predictive programming that foreshadows a news event that could only have been placed there by a higher power. They would be the exception, because the rule is these are obvious propaganda messages inserted with intent to bolster future fake news events. But I want to debate, I want to have the conversation, because I think that if we allow the divine fallacy in, we're lowering our standards. And that is the divine fallacy. If man cannot explain it, it must be a higher power. And as I said before, adding on to Arthur C. Clarke, it may look like magic because it's so advanced, but that doesn't mean it is magic. And the instant you say it's magic or it's mystical, you're basically saying the intellect cannot comprehend this, so it must surrender and give into vagueness. And the truthers have been swimming in vagueness for 20 years, whereas we have the answers now. So I'm done with the mystic explanations unless you have evidence. I would weigh Metascript over mysticism any day, and I want to have that conversation. Let's talk about it. What's causing the fake news? Mysticism, higher powers, aliens, demiurges, or is it man programming man? Plain Dakota says there's no intelligence in AI and there never will be. Yeah, it's basically a search engine. It's a labor-saving device. But it's not any more intelligent than your library. It's just automated and faster and capable of interpreting vast or rather complex instructions. I mean, I use it quite a lot. I will go through old scripts or old journals, for example. Like, you could take an old journal where you just write free association, copy and paste it into AI and say, please write this as a third-person narrative and use descriptive language. And it'll do it in 5 seconds. It's rather incredible. But the idea that it's alive or sentient, that's just wishful thinking at best, but it's just people being misinformed. Okay, let's see here. Tomino3 says, problem is no originality, so even the Concurrent is just a ripoff of old Hollywood. White Noise, Close Encounters, Toxic Train, Cover Up. Yeah, okay. That's another point of it, too. So much of our predictive programming is, or so many of our movies are just recycled. So yesterday we were talking about, or 2 days ago, we were talking about JFK. It turns out 2 months prior to JFK's assassination, the anniversary is tomorrow. So September 22nd, Jackie Kennedy and John F. Kennedy and one of their friends were making a home movie where they simulated JFK dying. And this is all according to a story in Vanity Fair. Jackie goes outside and tells the Secret Service, hey, run inside and pretend like you just heard shots. So she's recording them, and they run in, and JFK is dead in the foyer, covered in ketchup. Now, we have a video from that day from the JFK archives, but we don't have those clips yet. But the author of this piece posted some stills, which were oddly prescient. One of them looked like Zapruder's film, looking at the Lincoln. But again, just to reiterate the story here, it just came out in Vanity Fair that 2 months prior to JFK's assassination, he was in a home movie where he and Jackie were enlisting the Secret Service in faking his death for fun, for some reason. And one of the individuals that was involved in the ketchup fake murder scene was the head of security on the day JFK was assassinated. So what does that mean? I have a few ideas, but it kind of makes me think that Jackie and JFK, that they were pretty well apprised that they were going to be involved in a Kubrick-directed stunt, a PR event, a psyop. Armin Ree says, funny the universe uses media to predict what's next in media. Yeah, I think it's funny that if you go with that theory, that the higher powers are inspiring directors to offer prophetic hints about future simulated news events. And many of these simulated, and again, I mentioned earlier about how some say it's because they have to tell us to avoid karmic retribution. Well, many of the simulated events don't even involve murder or people dying. Oftentimes the foreshadowing is about, like it's the whole gambit of psyops and perception management stunts. It doesn't always have to be terror attacks and shootings. Okay, well, and one more point here, because this is not a new phenomenon. A lot of people have observed it. Kubrick's most famous of it. But what we have really come to conclude here is that the ultimate goal is worldview warfare, a worldview monopoly, the kind that religions have always had, but exercised through media itself. And that there is a synchronization between entertainment and news media. When the entertainment is, it's not obviously not all, but when it's going to be reaching a sufficient number of people. Any big media, any big productions, big movie productions are always going to be full of this stuff. And we can, in fact, predict it. I mean, I watched so many movies over the last couple of years with the understanding of predictive programming. And once you know what you're looking at, it jumps out. I can give you an example. I was watching Colony. Season 3, Episode 11, they said, Seattle's ground zero for the reboot of civilization. And it was about this alien takeover. But you never see the aliens. They're invisible. But everybody shuts down because the government is now under the control of this invisible presence. And they're going to reboot society starting in Seattle. So 3/11. So I was writing this stuff down. I was paying attention to the different clues. But when we got to 3/11/2020, the pandemic's ground zero was in Seattle, and they said it was going to be the Great Reset. So Great Reset, Great Reboot. I mean, what's the difference? But the 3/11 was there. And I watched Colony knowing that I was going to see predictive programming. That's my point. I predicted it was going to be in there. I looked back at Machete. I looked back at various roles that De Niro was in. In fact, I was looking at Deer Hunter, knowing that this individual is associated with predictive programming related to Trump. And knowing this in advance, I find it. And I find it to be internally consistent. That's another thing about it. So we talk about fictional universes a bit here. And a fictional universe is internally consistent. And it could be a body of, like, let's just Marvel Universe, for example. In the Marvel Universe, everyone plays by the same rules. You have mutants and you have normies. You have outer space. You have the basic, stage that's been set. And as long as you don't break the rules, you can write and create content for that fictional universe. Well, our media, which always treats all of its own reportage as real, exists within a fictional universe, just like the Marvel Universe. And all the various psychological operations reference one another, or they all exist in the same realm, the same closed system. So knowing this, you can more or less predict how internally consistent it is, that you can with confidence discern the different directors and those who are involved in various events. And so, for example, the Robert De Niro thing was an eye-opener, because I just see Robert De Niro hanging out outside of the Trump trial, and I said, hey, he's got to have some significance to the coming Trump head wound. And this was before Trump was shot, mind you, because we're always looking at predictive programming as a model. So having looked at De Niro before Trump was shot, we made the connection to Hinckley and to Frank Murray in The Joker getting shot. And then, of course, we all know what happened next is fake history. So they're making history all the time. Tomanoid3 says Elysium movie has 311s, lockdowns and masks and a reset. Yeah, I think what we're also confronting is that there's so much of it. It's so pervasive. I'm saying it's intrinsic to what media is, but it's so pervasive that you can no longer call it anomalous. You can no longer call it eerie coincidences. And it's getting increasingly difficult to stand by the idea that it's not engineered by the same entities that engineer all of the psyops. And the greatest or the biggest refutation against it, or the biggest pushback, is you're saying they write the history in advance. Well, yeah, what do you think the space program is? Every single simulation, mass casualty simulation, is a script. And if it's a script and it's written in advance and they perform it as real, then yes, they are in fact scripting history. I highly recommend Megalopolis because it has all of the answers right there in front of you. I mean, it's pretty blatant. And it combines The Matrix with Dark City, along with Francis Ford Coppola's vision of New York being 9/11. But it opens up with these characters called the Design Authority. And they look just like the strangers from Dark City. They're dressed in black. They have the black hats, all symbolic of Saturn, time control. It has the clock symbolism. And they stop time. And they detonate something in New York. It looks 9/11-y. But the point is, the Design Authority can stop time. They control time. Now, that is literally true. The metascriptors control time. Those who write history control time. They decide what big events happen to the minute. They plan these things. So we are dealing with the Design Authority. And it transcends partisan politics. None of these psyops are done in a vacuum. It's not like, oh, look, it's a forest, and every so often you find a fake tree. No, the whole forest is fake. And if you disagree or you have a different opinion, I would ask, well, then show me the one that's real, because we've been checking. Okay, let's continue here. World Stage says, didn't the 9/11 system get created when they started the towers? Yes. 1968, 2001 Space Odyssey, which predicted 9/11, and 911 became the official emergency code here in America. The Pentagon's construction started 9/11, 1941, so 60 years to the day. Flight 77 flew for 77 minutes before it hit the Pentagon, which was 77 feet high. Building 7 burned for 7 hours, fell on its own footprint in 7 seconds. We have so many examples of precise timing and symbolism. It's replete with symbolism. And that's one more thing. The body count. The body count must be assumed to be 0 if you find out it's a movie. They don't kill people in movies. And when it comes down to something as big as a 9/11 or some mass shooting, your tendency might think, well, maybe some people died. Or Vegas, for example. Maybe some people did because there's so many. And I push back against that because if there's any indication of hoaxery, you have to start at 0 because now the burden of proof is not yours. And when it comes to the numbers thing, and it's easy to be intimidated by this, even people who know that 9/11 had the fake planes, the no planes crowd, are still convinced that some people died in the towers. And I push back against that because if you're willing to subtract 2/3 of the casualties, why leave these ones? And when you get down to it, there's little to support it. There's very little to support any body count if there's any indication of hoaxery. So we just kind of have to not falsely accept or wrongly accept the burden of proof. But I think a lot of people are getting to this point. But it matters. And the big numbers shouldn't intimidate you. And on 9/11 in particular, you just cite the fact that there were 88 drills being performed that day. Do you know how many people that involves? Think about all these different drills, all the people on the ground. They made sure it was a closed set. Anybody who was out and about that day were a part of it. There's no reason to assume that people were being killed in this thing. And one more point on that. Non-disclosure agreements are invalidated during illegal acts. So if you're signing an NDA and you're just a low-wage crisis actor, and then a bunch of people get slaughtered, you can violate the NDA. It's no longer valid. And the reason why you always see these individuals smirking and they seem happy is because it's a payday for them. They're not really mourning anybody. But the nobody's dead, the nobody died argument is strong. The maybe some people died argument has no legs. The people who are still stuck on some people died, the death clingers, it's on them to prove which ones. If the mainstream media couldn't convince me of one death, then the person clinging on to maybe somebody died has to go to the morgue or something. They have to do some homework. But the assumption of death needs to go as well. Esteban says flawless logic. Well, we're talking about the deconstruction of propaganda, and I think we have to maintain our standards. So no divine fallacy. And divine fallacy just means I can't figure it out, so God did it. And that's the analogy I use whenever I talk about magic shows. Oh, you can see how he did 5 of the tricks, but you can't figure out how he pulled the quarter out of his assistant's ear. Must be magic. No, it's a magic show, and they're all tricks. Just because you can't figure it out doesn't mean it's magic. And when we look at the news media and any major psychological operation, you're not necessarily required to know how they did it exactly. It's enough to know there's evidence of hoaxery, chicanery. Look at the ISS. The space station has so many weak points in it. I mean, it's really the Achilles heel of the whole space program. But one green screen glitch is all you need. We don't need to know exactly how they perform these stunts. Otherwise, you get straw man arguments like, oh, I think you guys are wrong that they couldn't possibly be hanging on bungee cords because of the way they flipped. Therefore, they're in space. It's like, well, no, I don't know for sure they're hanging from bungee cords. I don't know how it works. But it involves more research. And we did. And we found that Christopher Nolan's Inception has all the answers. The rotating stage, faking 0G without CGI, without wires, using a seesaw and a counterweight. That's far more likely. Lucid Stream says, Mordwand has joined Discord. He's an ISS believer. Oh, yeah. And anyone who believes in and defends the outer space is doing so with, I guess you'd call it an argument from authority. They trust the screen. And that falls apart when they have to confront the evidence that they're defending mindlessly. A good example of this is the ISS's shadow. And I've confronted believers like McToon, and he's such a coward about it. I'm like, look, McToon, the ESA has a shadow beneath the ISS. You should not see a shadow on the ground from a space station 200 miles above, that dark, that round, that consistent. This has to be a computer model. It's not a camera looking at the Earth. It's a computer model. The shadow's where it would be appropriately, but it shouldn't be visible. And I did some research as to whether or not you would see the shadow of an object like as sparse as the ISS. It's a bunch of tubes the size of a football field. Would it leave a dark shadow the size of a city from 200 miles up? Well, the answer is no. I mean, technically, yes, but you wouldn't see it. It wouldn't really be visible. It wouldn't be noticeable. Well, the ESA has a shadow. So what's the answer there? It can't, but it does. So Red's Rhetoric, who was on the conversation, said, oh, that's just a smudge on the camera lens. I'm like, no, it's not a camera lens. But he said, oh, it's just a smudge. So I thought, okay, that's interesting. It's only a smudge, but how come the smudge is in every single ESA video? Are they ever going to clean that lens? So we called it Smudgegate because they had no answer for it. Okay, let's see here. Got your email, Conscious Reality. I'll bring it up right here. Yes, so we do have some people who are like defending it, and it's like, why? Why would you be an advocate for media? Some people used to say, I want to be a devil's advocate. What if it's all real? Like, you don't get it. I'm the devil's advocate. The media asserts everything is real, and we're the ones calling it fake. We're the ones who are taking this contrarian opinion. And if you're going to take a contrarian opinion to the skeptics, you first need to defend what we're being skeptical about. And you can advocate for media because you believe so hard, you believe they went to space, you believe they're floating because of the way their hair sticks up, but your belief doesn't really add anything to the conversation. We need facts. And one thing I try to pin these individuals down to is this. Can you show me one thing done in the ISS that could not be imitated with special effects here on Earth? Because some will say, well, the only way someone could flip like that is if they were in 0G. It could not be simulated with special effects. It's like, have you seen Gravity? Science fiction movies do space better than NASA. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. Science fiction movies shouldn't be doing better special effects than the people who are actually doing the thing for real. And I can there are things that would give away the fakery that they can't do. Like, for example, you only have one angle. The camera's here, astronauts are here doing their little marionette thing, and you're just watching from this one camera angle. You could not have a third party with a camera walk around and behind them, record the cameraman, and make a big circle around the room with one contiguous shot. You can't. It would give away the infrastructure. The space mouse. Oh, I love the space mouse. Mousegate, says Joe Santo, the space mouse. Well, what the space mouse reveals a couple of things. It reveals the lack of objectivity. It reveals how quickly people will lie. People will say, no, I don't see a mouse there. Well, objectively speaking, it's a mouse. It's like, you see a cloud, and let's just say you see a cloud and it's shaped like an elephant. Like, yeah, we're not saying it's literally an elephant. But if it's shaped like one, it has a trunk, 4 legs, little tail. To say it looks like an elephant isn't really a stretch. It's not apophenia. People point out things like this all the time. Now, yes, it's a cloud. We get it. But cloud can be shaped like an elephant. When it came to the mouse gate, you have what appears to be a mouse running around on the rocket engine. And they'll say, it can't be a mouse. It's not a mouse. Well, no, we're not saying it's a mouse. We're saying it looks like a mouse, and it's moving like one. And they can't even admit that. You got to fight them. You basically got to pull it out of them. It's like it's crazy, like pulling teeth. Like, can you just at least admit that this space ice debris at Mach 8 formed into the shape of a mouse and walked around for a minute, and that it's awesome because it so closely looked like a mouse? They can't even admit it. They're just straight up in denial. They deny that it looks like that because it's so problematic. Because the mission where we saw the space mouse is the same mission that they called Mighty Mouse, where they said, oh, we're sending some genetically modified mice to the space station. So Mighty Mouse is the one that floats around in space, the cartoon character. So what are the odds that on the mission where they're sending Mighty Mouse to the space station, that we see mice on the outside of the rocket? So this can only mean one thing. Somebody's playing a joke, probably Elon Musk. But then the problem is this. If Elon Musk inserted a mouse onto that mission to be funny, it gives away that it was pre-produced. It wasn't live. It was presented as live, but it wasn't live. Unless they added it on real time using AVR, highly unlikely. Highly unlikely. But yeah, it was the CRS-19 mission sending mice to space. So at a minimum, they should have said, wow, this is incredible. It should have been on Futurism. It should be on all the science magazines. Hey, look, on the mission where they were sending Mighty Mouse to the space station, space ice miraculously formed into the shape of a mouse. They should have just said that. I talked to Metabunk, Mick West, and he's like, oh no, that's a video compression artifact. And then like half an hour later, he's like, no, that's actually, it's ice. it's ice and it's just forming like that. But no, it's not a mouse. I'm like, why? Can you at least admit it's shaped like a mouse? And he's like, no. Okay, fine. Okay, let us continue here. J5 says, isn't the biggest red flag that they're photographing a round planet when we live on a pancake? Well, it depends. I mean, pancakes are round. I don't believe that any of the images of the Earth that we've seen from space are legitimately from space. Even if you are able to fully demonstrate in some way that this is a ball and it's rotating 1,000 miles per hour, it's 25K circumference, it totally comports with the solar system model, fine. You know, I'm not really all that wedded to the idea. I mean, the solar system's flat, the universe is flat, that's good enough for me. But if the Earth is a ball, it still doesn't validate NASA's CGI fakery. They're still hiding something. In all likelihood, continents. They're probably hiding Atlantis. They're probably hiding a place that is so much better than what we have, and we're on quarantine. And they use fake news to control us, so we never go to where they are. My Third Eye says, the new vids of SpaceX rockets landing look so fake they must be real. It's one of their tricks. They have not only merged real and fake using movies to influence our minds regarding TV, and they merge these things, but I think they've dumbed down the special effects and done so in such a way that, I don't know, maybe it's cognitive dissonance, or it's just brain damage. Whatever they're doing to us, yeah, it's visual literacy. Plus, people don't even pay attention. Most people don't pay attention. Okay, let's see what else we have here. We will go through my minds.com in a minute here. I want to go through my list. Points of interest. Okay, Loomer breaks up with Poole. Yeah, Tim Poole had Nero or Milo on. They threw Laura Loomer under the bus. Milo's attempting to destroy her. This is not all that interesting, except in the context of what I've been talking about, how there seems to be some kind of controlled demolition going on with a lot of these right-wing influencers. Even Nero talked about this. Oh, sorry, Nero's his Twitter account. Milo Yiannopoulos used to be the editor of Breitbart. He's talking to Tim Poole about how so many of the popular top-tier podcasters in the political realm are fake. That they have bots. That the advertisers are not getting their money's worth because the audiences are largely bots. He even went on to say that there are companies that you give money to, like $500,000, and if you put out a book, they will buy your book in all kinds of marketplaces and all kinds of stores to artificially game the system. And I said this before, that Don Trump Jr. put out a book that nobody read, but somebody bought a lot of copies, and these copies are in warehouses, who knows where. But they do this in order to game the system. They get up on the top list of new release books, and then they get yanked off these lists because it's determined that it's probably fake. Then they claim they're being censored, and they try to sell based on that. But many of the popular voices are only popular because they're artificially propped up and they have a bunch of bots. I like to point out that we are bot-free here. There are no bots in the IPS. J5 says they're hiding land in the Indian Ocean. Where else would the Malaysian Flight 370 land? Well, what about the uncharted waters? What about Terra Mar, where Ghislaine Maxwell had this, I think it was, yeah, let me bring this up really quick. We have this Ghislaine Maxwell nation she was a citizen of. We're talking about Epstein's girlfriend. The Terra Mar Project. It was a self-described environmental non-profit organization founded in 2012 by Ghislaine Maxwell. Now, the idea behind it is explained here. It's a private limited company, and it says here that their objective was the preservation, protection of oceans, coastlines, and tidal areas. But it was a nation that was established out on the uncharted waters. And I was reading about how many or how much of the Earth's surface is uncharted. And I was pretty surprised. Could they smuggle a continent? Could they hide a continent here or there? I would say probably yes. Okay, let's move on. You know, Don Lemon. You remember that guy, Don Lemon? He said that the Malaysian Flight 370 went into a black hole. He said that on TV. Like straight-faced, not even joking. Okay, let's continue on. We talked about the Loomer breakup. This is actually a better story today. Jussie Smollett had his conviction overturned. And a lot of people on the right are mad about it. So I've been sharing this image of Donald Trump, or Donald Smollett. There he is with the noose around his neck. Now, I did this because Donald Trump faking his assassination attempt is way worse than Jussie Smollett faking his lynching. Way worse. So a lot of people are mad that Jussie Smollett is getting away with attempting to smear MAGA by claiming he was attacked when he really just paid his roommates to do it. I mean, this was a hoax. Jussie Smollett's lynching was a hoax. He wasn't really coated in bleach and wasn't called names. That was all fake. But for 24 hours, it was real. For 24 hours, everybody treated it like it was real. It was treated with seriousness. He cried on TV, and then it came out it was a hoax. And all those people that reported it was real, act like, okay, well, this guy tricked us. But I think that in itself was a ruse to hide the fact that all they do is run psyops. But anyway, my point I raised on Twitter was that Trump faking his assassination attempt was actually worse than what Smollett did. Because Smollett didn't really impact anybody. He destroyed his own career. But Trump influenced everybody in the world. He became a martyr, a hero. And think about how cynical and manipulative it is for Trump and company to say that God saved him. Oh, God saved me from the bullet. You can prove it because it's 6/11. It happened. And that references Ephesians 6:11, the armor of God. So God protected Trump. And all of his friends are saying this. He says it. Maybe God wants to protect me. He's saying this because he knows that his voters are idiots. I'm sorry. I mean, from his perspective. I mean, I don't mean it from my perspective, but Trump thinks these idiots will believe anything. Because he knows what happened. He knows that he took that McDonald's ketchup packet and smeared it on his face. He knows, and all the people around him know it was fake. So for him to say God saved him is blasphemy. And I'm not even a believer. And I see it as blasphemous. It's manipulative. It's cynical. So again, Trump, Smollett, Jussie Smollett, whatever. Jay Leno fell 60 feet, and now he's wearing an eye patch. Some think this may be some kind of predictive programming for the coming Trump eye patch, which is going to follow his head wound. Again, that's going to happen later. We've been very much accurate in our predictions. Pokemon Go. Let me bring this up because people used to say, oh, of course there's an ISS. You can just get the app. And I would say, well, then I guess there's a Pokemon because you can just get the app and find them. Well, here is something that just came out. There's a company called Niantic that apparently has been using Pokemon hunters to build an AI navigation system.
Go was a scam. Niantic just announced that they have been taking the data from Pokemon Go and using it to build one of the largest geo models for navigation ever.
Now, one point here, I went to Aurora, Colorado, and they put up this monument for the victims of the Joker shooter. And it's like these 17 swans, like a sculpture, a bunch of swans, and it's next to their courthouse. So I went out there to do a live stream, and it was on the day they were commemorating the anniversary of the shooting. And I went out to see the sculpture, and it's surrounded by people walking around it. And they're looking at their phones. They look down. I'm just like, wow, these people all knew somebody who died at the event, or it's a bunch of actors. So I'm trying to figure out, if the whole thing was fake, how did they get all these people to hang out at this sculpture, at this memorial? So I get closer, and it turns out that they weren't there for the memorial that day. They were hunting Pokemon. So the city had a Pokemon event at the courthouse grounds as this sculpture is being unveiled. So if you drove by when the sculpture is being unveiled, you would get the impression that all kinds of mourners were there. No, there wasn't a single one. They were all Pokemon hunters. And I thought, that's kind of funny. They just like, oh, send some people over here hunting Pokemon. It's like crowds on demand. Let me play some of this again.
And so basically all the people who've been playing Pokemon Go over the years have been free geo-navigators. And they would, when they wanted something to be geolocated or pictures of an area to be taken, they would put Pokemon in those areas so people would go out there and take the pictures and navigate the areas, all while being tracked by their GPS navigation devices. That's crazy. That's thinking 100 steps ahead.
Great point. Thinking 100 steps ahead. F says, and the righties and MAGA crowd who call everything a hoax think this one is real. Yeah, talk about cognitive dissonance. They're offended if you call it fake. And I went out to a crowd of MAGAs here at a rally on Halloween, and I was informing them that nobody died on 7/13 and it was all a hoax. Not one person wanted to talk about it. They just huddled together and laughed nervously. They couldn't even confront it. I was accused of being a Democrat. Like, well, I'm not even a voter. Okay, continuing. My challenge to the Synchro Mystics. I did put out the poll, but I also have this one. I need one example of predictive programming that could not have been deliberate and therefore must have been the result of a higher power. I want a specific example, and then I think we'll make some progress here. Crypto K has been commenting on this thread. We had a conversation with him before. He's done a lot of just extensive work into the breakdown of Kubrick's work. And I think there's an overemphasis on Stanley Kubrick, that there's a lot of overlap, in fact. King Ravana says, I would like to hear from one friend of that crook's parents. Truman B says, watch Lil Wayne's My Homie Still video, which is out during the Aurora Theater hoax, concurrent programming. Okay, that's a great example. So Lil Wayne's video has the Joker, Batman theme, skeletons in a movie theater. And then as this Dark Knight Rising, and this is a Christopher Nolan, or Jonathan Nolan, so highly significant. As the movie is being premiered that night, they have a couple of trailers. One of the trailers is a movie with Sean Penn, where it's a bunch of gangsters coming out of a movie screen. It's called Gangster Squad. So they come out of a movie screen and they shoot up the theater. This was the trailer before the Joker shooter comes into the theater and shoots it up. And so this movie, Gangster Squad, was, I think they might have altered it even because of Aurora. Aurora shootings force Warner Brothers to film a new ending for Gangster Squad. How many times have we seen this? They renamed Assassination Run, the finale of The Boys Season 4, because of the Trump shooting. They put warnings on Netflix movies that mirror the recent school shootings. So they changed it. Another great example is Collateral Damage. Lots of connections there, lots of symbolism. But Collateral Damage, which had billboards overlooking Ground Zero, had to be changed. And it had to be delayed because it was too reminiscent of 9/11. Even Francis Ford Coppola's movie, he said because of 9/11, he had to delay it. He had to delay it because the movie took place in the midst of New York being destroyed and then the world rebuilding off of it. So it would have been in poor taste, I suppose. But we have many examples. Gangster Squad getting reshoots. It was pulled due to a scene where characters fire guns at the audience through a movie screen. They had to postpone it until the next year. So we have so many examples, like in the thousands probably, but we could easily catalog many, many examples of concurrent real-time alignment between fake news and the movies. And the more we compile, the more solid the case we have made for the faking and fabrication of history itself through the medium of fake news for the purpose of mass mind control and a world view monopoly that is uncontested because it's invisible. And this needs, I think, to be this is the cutting edge, in my opinion, but this should be the focus of anyone trying to figure out what we're actually looking at. We can go ahead and stop wasting time with bad models and adapt to new information. Okay, let's continue here. J5 says, I knew a 400-pound 20-year-old that said he's an invisible Pokemon. I could see him, but I might be an invisible Pokemon too. I don't know much about that culture. I just know that when I went out to check out that monument in Aurora, there was a bunch of Pokemon hunters there, given the appearance from far off that you were looking at mourners. So I was doing a live stream, and this is how bad YouTube used to be. I was there at the memorial talking about the event, and during my live stream, they actually pulled the plug on me. Like, I was targeted. We've been targeted. All right, let's move on. Go into my minds.com. Now, this is kind of funny. Laura Loomer wanted to burn a Quran on stage, and she wanted to pretend to be Jewish. You know, for shock value, because she's always been a troll. And she shows up to work, and at the time she was working with Milo Yiannopoulos, who wrote all her scripts, wearing a pentagram. She bought a pentagram on Amazon so she could be Jewish. And he had to explain to her that it's the Satanists that use the pentagram, and that if she's going to pretend to be Jewish, she needs to learn how to draw a six-pointed star. So he put videos up where he's trying to show her what a Jewish star is and how it's different from the satanic star. I mentioned Milo's in the process of destroying her. That's just one example. Jay Leno's been seriously injured after comedian says he fell down a hill at the Hampton Inn. Now, things do happen. This could be real. It could be real. I'm curious as to what your takes on it are. I kind of get the impression that if something reaches a critical mass, if it's projected onto our collective psyche, it's probably contrived or part of a bigger agenda. So here's Leno.
Earth happened to Jay Leno.
Oh, your poor face.
Look at my eye.
Oh my gosh.
Jay Leno is all bruised up. The left side of his face is black and blue. His eye is swollen shut.
Now, right off the bat, it looks real, but that doesn't mean it is real. This is just, it could easily be special effects. If he really did have a mangled face, would he show it off? I kind of question that. The one eye stuff is so prevalent in all the symbolism, but let's continue.
Eye is swollen shut, and look at his injured wrist.
I broke my wrist, lost the nail on the finger, and then I'm all black and blue.
The comedian says he fell down a 60-foot hill.
I said, well, the hill doesn't look that steep. Let me take it down. And
Okay, so he tumbled down a hill.
then you roll.
Anybody here have anything on this? Makeup? Makeup says my third eye. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. F says, how did a hill turn Jay Leno into a zombie? Like, I think we should believe people, you know, but I don't know. In this case, it just seems like so many of these actors and comedians are conscripted for life. And this is another key point. The actors are always actors, not just when they're in the movies, but even, and maybe even especially, when they're just on the streets. Case in point, Robert De Niro. You know, people say, oh, look, Robert De Niro, he's Trump deranged. It's like, no, he's out there serving some type of a purpose as a propaganda pawn, as a messenger, and that he brings with him all of the associations, all of the associated roles he played. And recently I coined a term, predictive programming proxies, to refer to the entertainment counterpart to the real world character. A good example of this is Biff Tannen. Biff Tannen is well known to be based on Trump, and in terms of predictive programming, the Back to the Future movies have all been pointed out as having a tremendous amount of significance with 9/11. So it makes a lot of sense then that you would call Biff Tannen a proxy for Trump, a stand-in, a character to represent this future character that we would see on the world stage. So we grew up with Trump. We have already been prepared for the Trump as he is right now. The characters that Robert De Niro played, specifically Travis Bickle or the senator, were both related to these recent events. The headshot on Trump, the character of Trump overall, the Trump derangement stuff. Anybody involved in Trump derangement, like the big examples of it, Stephen King is another one. Likely these guys are doing it as part of their bigger role here. It's like a straw man. Trump is a straw man. Yeah, he's real. He's an actor. But is he rogue? Is he bucking the system? Is he fighting the deep state? No, that's all fantasy. And the fact that he faked his assassination attempt, it wasn't just Trump faking it. He's just an actor, but it was faked. It was faked with the full knowledge of everybody there behind him, who are all actors in some capacity, but it was done with the full knowledge and participation of the Secret Service and the AP, like the AP photographer who photographed the bullet whizzing by Trump's ear. I mean, think about these characters. Richard Gill. He had a camera capable of photographing a bullet like that. That's amazing in and of itself. But he caught the lucky shot of a bullet whizzing by Trump's ear. Same photographer, 23 years prior, was there in the classroom with George W. Bush on 9/11, and he took the picture of the Secret Service agent whispering in Bush's ear. So if 9/11 was a psyop, and this guy was a part of that, and then this thing happens, and he takes all these iconic photos, yeah, it's pretty safe to say we're looking at propaganda events. King Ravanus is Biff Triumphant. Yeah, I call him Hiram a Biff Tannen. Oh yeah, same photographer that caught the dude throwing the shoe at Bush's head. Is that the same guy? I have the image here. And the individual who photographed RFK being shot falling to his death photographed the 9/11 falling man. Like lucky shots. And that just tells you who's in on it. You know, these individuals are part of that. The media is a liar. It doesn't mean everybody in it is a liar. A lot of them have good intentions and are truth tellers and do real reportage. But good liars don't lie with every breath, because then you wouldn't believe them. They lie strategically when they can get away with it, when they need to, when there's an advantage. So you can look at the media as a liar, and the psyops are the lies. They don't lie all the time, but they're capable of doing it. And good liars have the trust of those they lie to. The media, a good liar, has the trust of its audiences. And when it needs to, it can lie to them. It's really not complicated. Here's Trump talking about, this is fascinating, he's talking about the wounds all over his body. Listen to this. And this is 3 weeks before Butler.
And I have the wounds all over my body. If I took this shirt off, you'd see a beautiful, beautiful person. But you'd see wounds all over me. I've taken a lot of wounds, I can tell you. More than I suspect any president ever.
CJ asks, was Trump divinely inspired to talk about his wounds 3 weeks before, possibly foreshadowing more wounds to come? Yeah, was he divinely inspired? Or is this predictive programming? And this building up of the martyrdom narrative, which they had been building up. I mean, everybody was talking about it until it happened. It wasn't just like, oh, this one obscure channel predicted it. No, everybody was talking about it, from Tim Pool to Alex Jones to General Flynn. And then the lefties were all saying, we wish this would happen. Everybody was talking about it. Then when it happened, nobody questioned it. And that's how this works. It was in the realm of possibility. Conscious Reality says, what do you think about Trump's appointment, RFK Jr. and Dr. Oz? Yeah, RFK Jr. is disingenuous, dishonest. He's just a politician. I don't understand his appeal. I guess the anti-vaxxers like him. He walks around barefoot on airplanes. That's pretty bad. I don't have a problem with the worms in his head. I think it's weird that he collects roadkill and drops it off in Central Park, the whole bear incident. But overall, I think it's just inconsistent with the whole Kennedy thing. The QAnoners have said for years now, and it's been years, think about it, this has taken up a huge part of their lives. 5, 6, 7, 8 years, saying Kennedy's going to save us. JFK Jr. is going to save us. The Kennedys are the bloodline of Christ. Well, what about RFK Jr.? Does he not have the Christ blood? It's just inconsistent. Dr. Oz, what's interesting about Dr. Oz is his birthday, 6/11. Was he born in Seattle? Was there something with him in Seattle? But as far as these appointments go, yeah, interesting. I'd like to know more. But do I take any of this stuff to be literally important? Not really at this point. Over 200,000 in Washington without power from bomb cyclone. Here's what to know. A bomb cyclone. Do you remember fire NATOs? Okay, here's an example. Before I was really doing Metascript breakdown, I started to notice these correlations. And so we used to have these things called red boxes where you rent a DVD from this kiosk. And I saw this DVD out called Geostorm. So I get it and I watch it. And it's about weather control. And it's done from the space station. And the space station has some kind of a computer virus which causes the weather to become erratic. And suddenly you have fire tornadoes destroying the earth. Stuff like that. So I'm watching Geostorm and fire tornadoes. And then I am watching the news and it's all about the fires in California. And they start talking about fire NATOs, fire twisters, fire devils, fire whirls. So suddenly these are a huge story. And I had never heard of fire NATOs before. Wildfires are getting weirder. Fire NATOs. There were people on the news, like various reporters, talking about this new phenomenon caused by climate chaos of the fire NATOs. Now, I'm not saying they don't exist. There are certain conditions that create this phenomenon. But the ones they were showing us, the quote, bizarre fire tornadoes, looked like CGI. Twister is back with fire NATOs. Oh, they made a new movie on the Twisters movie, and they put fire NATOs in it. So I'm not saying fire NATOs don't exist. I mean, hypothetically, you could probably have shark NATOs. And anything could be a quote NATO. Anything could be caught up in it. But the idea that this is a new weather phenomenon is a joke. It's not new. They're just focusing on it. But they made it a trending story as the movie Geostorm comes out. So Geostorm 2017, a satellite designer tries to save the world from a storm of epic proportions caused by malfunctioning climate controlling satellites. So again, Geostorm 2017. And then I just remember watching these reporters in the news marveling at these fire NATO things. Ventura, California. Raw video. There's so many of them. I was going through these and I recognized, okay, well, what's behind this alignment between what is being promoted in Redbox, what is being promoted in the theaters, and what's happening on the news? It's all propaganda reinforcement. Predictive programming, concurrent programming, is propaganda reinforcement. It inserts propaganda messaging into our collective psyche, into our frame of reference, and they can act on it. So yes, good connections there. Conscious Reality CD, the Seattle, and the Blackout. Interesting headline. Again, the headline here is over 200,000 in Washington without power from bomb cyclone. Now, we were talking about the mission in space with the 2 stranded astronauts who are on a space odyssey, you could say. So they go up to space in Calypso. That's the name of the capsule. Calypso is the name of the nymph who imprisons Odysseus on the island for several years. And the theme here was obvious to us. We're like, okay, wait, Calypso, stranded, the astronauts are stranded. But what happens next in the Odyssey? Well, after Odysseus escapes, he has to confront the Cyclops, whose father is Poseidon. He makes the Cyclops mad, and he gets cursed in the name of Poseidon. So then Poseidon becomes the bane of Odysseus' existence. And I'm seeing mentions of Poseidon in conjunction with Putin. So again, Poseidon, ocean god, this all probably connects to the Kraken symbolism that we've seen recently. One nuclear-armed Poseidon torpedo could decimate a coastal city. Russia wants 30 of them. So I'm looking at this as an example of some kind of attack from, look at this, Russian megasub with Apocalypse Poseidon torpedo. Russia to arm gigantic new submarine with Poseidon nuclear doomsday torpedoes. So we have this theme of, weather or the sea. He's a god of storms. So a bomb cyclone, Seattle, it is definitely likely building up towards the same culmination. CNN piece on the photographer of the Trump assassination. Okay, thank you for posting that, F. Now, this is all really interesting. How photographers captured the Trump assassination attempt. So, looking at this picture, that is the cover of the movie Braveheart. Look at the flag. The blue is on the top left. Now, that's all very significant, and I have to compare this. And I'm typing in Braveheart and New York Post, because when Trump went back to Butler, first of all, after he was shot, New York Post put him on the cover with his fist raised. Then he goes back and they say, Braveheart, 200,000 witnessed Trump's triumphant return to Butler. So here is an overt reference to Braveheart. And there he is on the bottom right, Trump shot doing the Braveheart pose. So let's look at the Braveheart movie cover, the movie poster. This is propaganda. This is intelligently planned, coordinated propaganda. This is not the work of aliens or demiurges or gods. So here is Mel Gibson, and then here is Trump doing the same pose. But the fist raised, even the flagpole, look at the flagpole, and the sword. And then the blue on the side of his face where Trump got his ear shot. Look at the face paint. Now, let's go ahead and move forward with this one. Trump Truth Social avatar. So his Truth Social avatar has the American flag painted on his face, and it is totally reminiscent of Braveheart. And again, the blue is on that side of the face. It aligns with Braveheart, and it aligns with the flag. And then you go deeper, there's a 9/11 on his face. On his head, he has the 4547. You add that, you get 9/11. But here you have 9 stars in the blue area. And the blue area with the bottom of the stripe makes a 9. 2 other lines, 911. So you got 911. There's 9/11 connections like crazy around here. But the Braveheart movie poster, this is all by design. This is choreographed. And then the New York Post literally calls him Braveheart. And that ties into, Trump, his Scottish heritage. There's probably some deeper underlying meaning to all of this. But I'm just pointing out that this is not a coincidence. This isn't, and also significant is Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson, huge in the Q-universe. He directed Passion of the Christ. Jim Caviezel. Jim Caviezel was 33 when he played Jesus. And they claim he died on the movie set. He claims that he was struck by lightning while giving the Sermon on the Mount on the 5th take. That he died because he was struck by lightning and they resurrected him. He pointed out that he was 33, which made him perfect for the role of Jesus. So Braveheart, Mel Gibson connects the Q-universe. Mel Gibson is also believed by many QAnons to be some kind of a Hollywood whistleblower, mainly because of a lot of fake quotes and fake memes. But he's a huge hero. In fact, he was at a UFC fight and he nodded at Trump. And nonners thought that meant something huge. So again, these are not unintentional. These are propaganda messages programmed years in advance. Mel Gibson was part of the body of propaganda messaging, and that would be built into this Frankenstein juggernaut walking propaganda outlet, Donald Trump. I mean, he is a construct. He's an amalgamation of so many things. Musk has been hanging out with him a lot lately. And you look at Musk. He's Werner von Braun. He's Willy Wonka, Tony Stark, Constantine, and a bit of Jack Parsons. I don't know where the authentic one is, where Elon Musk is in that mix. Good call there, Lean Dion. The FBI series finale canceled because of the mass shooting. Yeah, and the reason they canceled the mass shooting, that was FBI Season 6. FBI Season 6 was canceled because of Uvalde. Now, the episode was called Prodigal Son, and it was about a gunman who was going to shoot up a school. But an FBI agent intervened. He stopped it, even though he didn't have a warrant. And he broke the rules, but he saved a bunch of kids. And they pulled the episode. Interestingly, one of the main storylines to come out of Uvalde is that the police stood down and some off-duty Border Patrol agent had to get up from the barbershop where he was, grab a shotgun, and do the job himself. So the idea of people following the rules, getting kids killed, was also consistent. CBS pulled the season finale because of Uvalde. Fascinating. This is from thewrap.com. It was going to air Tuesday, but then they had the Uvalde shooting, and they said 18 students were killed and one teacher. They have not announced when it will be back on. In real life, the shooting occurred at Robb Elementary. This is another one. There's quite a lot here. So many examples we can point to of movies having to change because they eerily predict or mirror the real thing. F says he did the same fist thing while he's on the WWF. Good catch there. So that's something iconic that he's known for. The 9/11 over the face, the Braveheart face paint, they called him Braveheart. Again, there are no coincidences on the world stage. This is, I mean, we can look at World Wrestling Entertainment in general, and the predictions built into their scripts for 9/11 in particular. It's a huge one. And then Hulk Hogan enters the mix, the RNC. All right, we're joined by Uncool Ben. Thank you for joining. Yeah, let's bring this one up. Trump, WWF raised fist, and he's a WWF Hall of Famer. And then, Jurassic Liars called last night, and he mentioned how fight, fight, fight is a statement from Gabby Giffords. So there's Trump and Hogan. And you remember Hogan is up there at the RNC and he says, I just suddenly remembered out of the blue, randomly, how I was looking down at Trump while blood was coming down my face at Hulkamania. And then I find myself looking up at Trump and he's got blood on his face. So he compares these two scenes. And then Trump blows him a big fat kiss. And I thought, that's a message. One Hall of Famer to the other, both WWE performers. Because what Hulk Hogan didn't say is, I bladed myself. I cut myself because I was imitating a wound. I was pretending to be really injured. And that's precisely what Trump presumably did. He bladed himself. But this is a pretty good example, though, of this reoccurring raised fist thing. Lean Dion says, he said Braveheart was his favorite movie on Andrew Schultz's podcast before Rogan. All the quote comedians really showed their government gesture badge this election. Yep, absolutely. So let's look at Gabby Giffords. Fight, fight, fight. That whole event was pretty fun. I mean, funny's not the word unless you know our full context. But I'm pretty sure that Jared Loeffner, the shooter of Gifford, I'm pretty sure that this is Glenn Beck's face merged onto this mugshot. Like, I don't know if it's a joke or if it's some kind of duper's delight. You know, maybe it's a joke. But I just think it's remarkable because they were blaming the right wing. They blamed Trump. They blamed Baby Drill. What's her name? The Palin, Sarah Palin, and Glenn Beck. And I look at this Glenn Beck, trademark kind of grin, smirk that he does. And I put their faces together before. I mean, this is kind of a tangent, but I just thought, how come he looks just like this shooter? Like, it could be a mashup. Besides the point. What I want to get to is this. Gabby Giffords gets shot in the head. And look, Gifford to gun control advocates. Fight, fight, fight. So this is a pretty interesting connection. Fight, fight, fight with Trump following the head wound. There's likely some deeper significance to it. Also the dates. There's quite a lot here that we could unpack. We'll look back at that at some other point. We're just looking at the propaganda, the intentionality of the propaganda following the Trump shooting. And we just scratched the surface. I mean, the fact that the guy photographed the bullet going by his ear suggests pre-planning. And not even that, because he would have necessarily needed a specific type of camera setup to catch that. But in all likelihood, that was a prefabricated shot. And then we have more to add on to this. We were talking about this before the shooting, the Atlantic. Oh, look, they got his ear. We had talked about this. This image was floating around our server. And look how specific that is, the very top of the ear. Then you had a second shooting attempt, and Time on 9/11 released this cover. Trump's in trouble, and he's backing out of a sand trap on the golf course. And this is after Ryan Routh is lying in wait, prepared to shoot him on the golf course. And then the Atlantic had previously had an image of a bullet hole and the number 47. And then more recently, they did another one where it's the side of Trump's head. And it says, Trump won, now what? And in that particular image, and I think I even have it here, it looks like a messy head wound. Here it is. I mean, what is it with the Atlantic? But I'm really glad that we had that event on 7/13 because it was vindicating. And I think it really helped us put things into a more, I guess, easily understood context. Because we talk about fake events all the time, but talking about 9/11 from 20 years ago, talking about these things, I don't know. I think that we need new psyops to break down, more recent events. And it seems like the Trump one did set off a lot of red flags for people. There were a lot of people saying it was fake or it looked fake or he probably staged it. The trouble with that explanation is obvious. Oh, Trump staged it to trick everybody and he got somebody killed. Like, they might have the basic truth there that it was fake, but they can't put it in the right context. The context of This is a magic trick, and the whole thing is a psyop. It's one of these issues that we constantly point out, that even if the truth gets out there, it gets submersed in the sea of irrelevance. There's too many subjective worldviews competing, and there's not an objective standard that we could point to. Nobody can follow through with it. If he faked it, then what? If Trump faked his ear wound, then A, Secret Service is involved. B, the White House doctor was involved. And you just go down the line. Who in the media would have been involved in this? And we could put up a list of people who would have no plausible deniability if they were to be charged with a hoax crime. Least of all Trump. Zero plausible deniability. Anybody still following Trump, like he is on their side, is in the fictional universe. Lean Diaz says, my friend thinks Trump definitely faked it, but they fired real shots into the crowd. Yeah, see, they can only get 1 foot out of the matrix. Yeah, Trump faked it, but the blood was real. I call that the bloody guardrail. The bloody guardrail scares a lot of people, and it keeps them from calling it all fake. But if you actually went and you tested it, it tastes like corn syrup or Heinz ketchup. It's fake blood. But you can see how you can tell somebody the truth, and if they're in the MSM box, it doesn't matter. That's why I say it's futile to reach out to the people inside the MSM box. The only people who are slightly reachable are in MSM Plus, the subset, the conspiracy theorists. And most of them have been co-opted by the GOP, and they can't get out of that. No talking from the dead shooter's family. Right. Yeah, that's another aspect to this thing as well. The witnesses, every witness there now needs to be included in being part of the cast of this trick. And it would also mean that the family lied. They cried and lied on TV, all fake. The funeral home, they had a funeral service, that had to have been fake. So you just follow the logic and follow the clues, and you can kind of see how, no, this is a huge event. That Butler, Pennsylvania wasn't Trump tricking a few people. The entire thing was a psyop. Just like January 6th. The scale of it is hard for people to see. My Third Eye says Joe Rogan was involved. He lied about the scar. Well, you know, I had a number of people in my own circle who said, why did he miss? A lot of people are mad about that. And I didn't know that. See, I'm not emotionally entangled with this thing, so I don't sit there hoping for people to die so my side can win some points. Like, I never think that way, but apparently a lot of people do. A lot of people would have preferred that he would have died. Now, the reason he didn't, it might be said, I mean, there's different explanations for it, but Thomas Crook may have been a flat earther and didn't account for the rotation of the earth. Some might find that plausible. Like, the rotation of the earth saved Trump. Like, had it not turned that precise amount, it would have hit him. And had he not been a flat earther, he would have calculated for the curve and the rotation. Oh yeah, one more point. The shooter's not dead. Everybody assumes Thomas Crooks was killed. That is another typical tactic. They tell you that the shooter was a patsy and the shooter got killed because they covered up what was an inside job. And then you had the second shooter on the water tower, but they never kill the patsies. These are not real patsies. These are actors playing a role. And Thomas Crook in particular was in BlackRock, some BlackRock movie or commercial, right? And it had a 33 in it. We talked about that. And moreover, he looks just like the Riddler. The Riddler saying Ave Maria when Batman said, "What did you do?" And then fast forward 84 days, and they do a moment of silence at 6:11 p.m. in Butler, and they have somebody sing that song. Lean Dion says Trump wasn't even saying the firefighter's full name. Yeah, I remember he was kissing the helmet. Okay, let's see what else. Yeah, BlackRock. That was the one. King Ravana. The BlackRock had him in a classroom commercial. Yeah, what a coincidence, right? All right, let me catch up on my Twitter feed. Now, we started off today mostly talking about predictive programming, which is worth talking about because it's the biggest guardrail. The false explanations for what we see all the time in fake news, they're obstacles to us getting to an understanding of what we're really seeing. So here's Trump in Beetlejuice. I don't think God did that. I don't think a higher power inspired this. This is political messaging, real-time manipulation. Here's Rupert Thorne, and you can see the little cut on his ear because Batman threw a boomerang at him. And this is the finale for a season that just ended about the time that Trump was shot. And then Amazon decided to pick up season 2 of The Caped Crusader. They made that decision on August 4th. Hugely significant. And these pictures have been circulating. I don't know if you've seen it, but Trump has this new body double. Appears to be carved out of wood, like some kind of a mask. Very wooden. Unlike any other Trump. It's like he's become it's like a sculpture. It's almost like he's carved out of stone. Very chiseled. Yeah, and a literalist. The shooter didn't know the Coriolis effect. Exactly. I'm surprised they didn't run with that because they haven't really demonized flat earthers in that way yet. They say they're dumb, they're anti-science, but they never accuse flat earthers of being terrorists or assassins. And they could have gone that way with Crooks. And said, yeah, he missed because he didn't know about the Coriolis effect. One more point about that. Trump was looking at his sign. He had a sign that said there's too many immigrants. And he said, look at that beautiful sign. And he points. So Trump has his hand up and he's pointing at the sign. And he tells everybody to look. And that is a typical magician's trick. Trump's a magician. He's like, look at that sign. Look over there. And as everybody looks over there, they're not looking at him directly. Then you hear the shots, and then he gets on the ground, and they put on the fake blood. So even that was a pretty good setup. Maggart4822 says, Jesse Smollett, the biggest guardrail ever, big damage control, back surfacing. Yeah, agreed. If they can show you an example of, oh, look, if this guy tried to fake us out, he tried to do a hoax, and we all exposed it. It's a scapegoat story. You put the sins of the village on the scapegoat and send it out. It wasn't us. We had nothing to do with this. But the truth of it is, they're all complicit in psyops 24/7. But occasionally, I guess they need to maintain the illusion that they have some kind of quality checks. But yeah, that Trump thing, classic misdirection. So when you look at this, I can point to right now 15 specific examples of predictive programming for the Trump head wound. Probably 30, but I got 15 on the top of my head. And all of these predicted a fake event that necessarily meant that Trump would have been performing this little magic trick. So now you can see why we say predictive programming could only be the result of the same propagandists who are faking future events. It could only be the result of the work of men in the psyop entertainment complex. There's no room for mystifying it. There's no space for it because quite obviously there's a build-up towards fake news events that have to be performed by actors knowing that they're faking these things. Silly Putty Trump says reverse history. Yeah, it does look really strange, doesn't it? Paradox Penguin says Trump spent some time with Penn Jillette on the Apprentice TV show, probably picked up some good tricks from him. Yeah, we have to use precise language. Like, I don't hear many people say false flag anymore, unless you're in Alex Jonestown drinking that Kool-Aid. Nobody says false flag anymore. If somebody says false flag, they don't know what they're talking about. There's never been one. False flags are a misdescription of hoaxes. and it's a purposefully planted idea, so you assume it was real. So this Trump event was not a false flag. It was not an inside job. Inside job suggests, oh, it was real, but somebody else did it. It's a variant of false flag. There's no false flags. There's no inside jobs. Not in the sense that it's used by truthers. We are looking at magic tricks. We're looking at illusion. We're looking at propaganda. It's as simple as that. Trump talking to some actors who are in the bleachers. Let me play this clip.
I can tell you.
You know what? I wanted to make sure you were okay.
Thank you, Darryl. She didn't move. Who was the guy on your left with the floppy hat?
Yeah.
That one guy. He's looking, the bullets are flying. He wasn't worried about getting hit.
And you know they drilled for this multiple times. So he's meeting with these actors, hugging them. Oh, how fun. Then you had that one guy, the JFK Jr. in a costume. Everybody thought that was JFK Jr. in a costume. Vincent Fuchsia. I knew people who believed that Vincent Fuchsia was JFK Jr. and he was the third coming of Christ, coming to save us. Like, I know people who actually fell for this psyop. It's embarrassing. So here he is, soaking up the JFK Jr. groupies. By the way, JFK Jr. did it with Ghislaine Maxwell and Princess Diana. Problematic, because the QAnoners believe Ghislaine Maxwell is like one of the deep state's madams and a terrible person, but they also believe JFK Jr. is their savior, and he was with her back in the 90s. And then it's problematic because the QAnoners believe that Barron Trump is actually the son of Princess Diana. Well, JFK Jr. and Princess Diana went out, so that seems like that might strain the relationship between Trump and JFK Jr., since they both had Princess Diana in common. But anyway, the Q-universe is just incoherent as always. But this guy here, this hobo-looking guy, yeah, they believe this is John F. Kennedy Jr. And he was there at the Trump rally, right behind Trump when Trump got fake shot. He's one of these obvious psyop operatives. I lost a lot of people. They got hooked on the Kool-Aid and the hopium. I lost friends over that psyop. And I'm not mad about it. People need to believe in stuff. It became their religion, and they can't admit they're wrong. They can't admit they've been duped. It's easier to trick a person or dupe a person than convince them that they've been fooled. F says, Epstein is on record calling Trump his best friend in an audio interview. MAGAs can reconcile that with draining the swamp. Yeah, they say that, oh, he was undercover. That he was just going undercover. Like, there's one video where he's dancing with Epstein, and he points at him with his finger, and the QAnoner said, anytime you see Trump pointing at somebody, it means that he's running a sting, and he's taking that person out. There's this huge body of fan fiction about Trump and JFK. It's voluminous, but it's all fan fiction. It's community-generated fan fiction, and they live within it. But it was amazing to watch, because after Vegas, auto-hoaxing was blowing up. Media skepticism was blowing up. Nobody died, nobody cried. But then Q comes out, and Q says, oh no, Vegas was real. The deep state did it to make Trump look bad. The deep state is behind it. So now the QAnoners are torn. They're like, I want to say it's not real, but Q says it is real. And at that point, we had a fracture. We had hundreds of people in our Discord server, and a lot of them went down to Q-Town. They had to go. They left. They said, you know, we can't be here anymore because you're saying it's all fake, and we trust the plan. We trust Trump, and he's going to defeat the deep state. Don't you want to save the children? And like, there aren't any children to be saved. It's all fake. And they said, okay, well, therefore you want to not save the children. Like, well, how many children have you QAnoners saved? You've had since 2015, it's 2024, add 9 years. Most of those children were probably old enough to have voted for Harris because they spent their lives not being saved, hanging out with a bunch of deep state Democrats. But no children have been saved by Q. And ironically, the Jim Caviezel movie, Sound of Freedom, is based on Tim Ballard. And Tim Ballard, again, this QAnon savior, is now facing human trafficking lawsuits. New federal lawsuit alleges Tim Ballard ran a trafficking operation under the guise, with his Operation Underground Railroad, of rescuing people. So he claims to be rescuing people, but he is in fact being charged with SA and worse. And I read some of these accounts. He was isolating women who were undercover with him, and once he had them isolated, he basically did all these bad things. And I think it's just ironic, because again, if you didn't watch Sound of Freedom when it came out, the nonners would be like, oh, well then you must be a child trafficker. And it was put out by this company called Angel, and I think it's a scam, because you go to their website and you can let other people buy you tickets if you get on a list. So apparently they get, just like with the books I was mentioning, how you pay a certain amount of money to some company and they'll buy a bunch of your books, so it makes it look like you're actually selling. Well, what they seem to be doing is buying out empty theaters. Like, nobody's watching the movie. They buy a few hundred tickets and they make it artificially appear that everybody's watching it. So I went personally to go watch, and it was only a handful of people there, and it was all MAGA-looking couples. I was like the outlier in the back corner taking notes, and it wasn't full. But by all accounts on TikTok, their viral marketing campaign, they said, oh, at the theaters, they're putting nanobots in the Coca-Cola, and they're turning off the air conditioner and shutting off the movie randomly. So a lot of people were going to make sure it wasn't going to happen to them. And I went, and it was an empty theater. So I walked away thinking they probably bought a lot of tickets for people who didn't actually go. They probably faked it. There's no way that crappy movie did better than Indiana Jones. Lucid Stream says, I don't know if the P stuff isn't real. Mouthy Buddha's docos are pretty compelling. I would suggest, I'm not saying it's not real, but the idea that you have like this cabal of baby eaters at the top of the Democrat Party, that's nonsense. I talked to one nonner, full-blown QAnoner, and I'm like, so you're saying Hillary Clinton drinks blood of babies and Donald Trump doesn't? He's like, yeah. So Democrats drink blood, Republicans don't. Like, yeah. The problem with this whole proposition is that you can go down to your local jail, go down to your local prison, or look up the offenders in your neighborhood if you feel like it, and you'll find that the people who do these terrible things are not, quote, elitists. They're not deep state. They're regular scum all over the place. And the idea that you could isolate a small group of evildoers and chop the head off that, and then you save the world, it doesn't work that way. Not at all. Evil is equally distributed across all socioeconomic backgrounds. And it's been years, and not one QAnoner has saved one child. So it's a bunch of crap, virtue signaling. They don't really mean it. It's a cult. My Third Eye says, I couldn't make it all the way through Sound of Freedom. Yeah, it was a garbage movie. It's actually disturbing. What's really disturbing about it is Jim Caviezel claims that to get into character, he had to watch thousands of hours of child abuse footage. And he's part of the QAnon thing, which doesn't really save children. I mean, none of it adds up to me, honestly. It's all just really, it's just propaganda. All right, let's continue here. Yeah, Sound of Freedom was a flop. I actually think it would have worked better if it came out before 2020. But I think it missed its cue. Like, no pun intended. Tomorrow is the anniversary of Leave the World Behind, 11/22, the anniversary of JFK getting assassinated. And Marilyn Manson's new album comes out, One Assassination Under God, which may be significant considering he portrayed himself as JFK in Coma White, and he gets killed in the video. And the release of the video is delayed by MTV, because of the timing of JFK Jr.'s death. And the song, Coma White, is based on the story of JFK as the second coming and the world's waiting for the third Jesus. And they're in mourning, awaiting this new hope. And then JFK Jr. dies on 7/16/1999, the same day that Eyes Wide Shut comes out. But again, so Marilyn Manson, new album, One Assassination Under God, I suspect may have some significance, especially considering that he has been represented in predictive programming and in psyops before. Littleton, for example, is something that was connected with them. Lucid Stream says, Sound of Freedom was a psyop. Check out Psyop Cinema and their analysis on it. I certainly will. I don't think it was a successful movie. They claimed it was bigger than and I haven't seen it yet, the new Indiana Jones, but I saw it. It was an empty theater, and there was really nothing to it. It was stereotypes. It was kind of phony. Nothing about it was real. I'm not sure if Tim Ballard ever actually saved anybody. Lucid Stream says, there's a scene in Fear and Loathing where Johnny Depp has a bottle of adrenochrome. Yeah, that's where it all started. But adrenochrome, as described, doesn't exist. It's a total myth. And the whole narrative of the deep state drinking the blood of children is a repackaged version of blood libel. And they've had 9 years to prove anything, and they haven't. Not that there was anything to prove anyway. They're so delusional. Like, I've known these people. Back in 2017, 2018, they're like, yeah, Hillary Clinton's dead. Tom Hanks, oh, he's dead. All these celebrities are dead. Ellen DeGeneres, they killed her. And they have all these tweets that they manufacture to make it look like these celebrities are sickos. And they're telling each other, oh, they're all dead. And they're using the lockdowns as a cover for killing the deep state. And they're going to tell us after. And then all the body doubles are going to reveal themselves as actors. And they had this huge story. It's maddening. A lot of people fell for it. It kind of wore off. There's a few diehards, but it's not organic. It's propped up by money and bots. Oh, by the way, tomorrow, let me check. Because 3 years ago, on the anniversary of the JFK assassination, a group of QAnon, here it is, QAnon believers gather in Dallas in the hope that JFK will return. Hundreds of QAnon supporters showed up in Dallas. So this is a few years ago. They gathered in Dallas because they thought JFK would return. They went to Dealey Plaza. So this is a sick cult. It really is. QAnon cult waiting for a miracle in Dallas. And you know how many fake JFK Juniors have shown up in the last few years? I found 6. You've got 107. 107 would only show his boots. And people thought he was JFK Jr. And he led them to believe it. And one day he dropped his phone. And you see this kind of a chubby guy. Very unflattering angle. Very un-JFK Jr. Broke the spell. Then you had Negative 48. Who sounded like JFK Jr. And people would listen to him for hours as he's doing his gematria calculations. Just reading numbers. It sounded like some crazy person on a street corner reading the phone book. Just numbers and names, and everyone's like oohing and awing. It's JFK Jr. Well, then he shows himself in public and not very JFK Jr. Some thought, well, maybe it's JFK Jr. in a chubby suit with an ugly mask on. Then you had Vincent Fuchsia, not JFK Jr. You have Edward X, not JFK Jr. And then there's the various people like Jesse Waters. So Jesse Waters, who's like 40-something, JFK Jr. would be in his 60s. Jesse Waters is a Fox News guy. Probably the smartest person on Fox. You may have seen this guy. And because Q once said, watch the water, the nonners say, oh, watch Jesse Waters. That's JFK Jr. So now the list is getting pretty long. And I'm like, well, let's start a shorter list. Let's have a list of people that aren't JFK Jr. Narrow it down. Yeah, MAGA fantasy. It's a fantasy. It's not only is it a fantasy, but it's dark. Because if true, then there's going to be a mass murder, bloodshed worldwide as the deep state gets killed. From CNN, more than 10 million tickets been purchased through the app called Pay It Forward during the July 4th opening of Sound of Freedom. 11 million direct box office sales. 11.6 million and 2.6 million, or over 20% of it, from Pay It Forward ticket sales. Well, I think they're gaming the system in the same way that authors game the system. I think they're gaming the system by inflating the interest in it. Okay, thank you for that. It's called Sus of Freedom. PsyOps Cinema. Very good. Now, Trump watched Sound of Freedom at Bedminster, sitting next to Jim Caviezel. Watched it the whole time, totally enraptured by it. And Caviezel said, well, I'm still Jesus. Trump is King David. Because if you remember, Trump was being compared to Jesus at the time, and Moses. But Caviezel still claims he's Jesus, so he said Trump can be King David. I mean, they're so just manipulative, because they're all part of the psyops. And they just feel like they're talking to idiots. They, amongst themselves, they have to be saying, these people will fall for anything. Nicole says, there are so many psyops it's hard to keep track of. This was on Twitter today. And I commented, I said, it's the psyop entertainment complex. Psyops are the rule, not the exception. Our news creates our worldview and our shared history, because psyops are treated as real. These are not anomalies, but these are intrinsic to what media is. Here's a cover of the new European, The Beast Unleashed. It's got Donald Trump as a wolf with a Make America Great Again hat. Interesting symbolism. Pluto's moving into Aquarius. Get ready for a once-in-a-generation revolution. Should be interesting. It's Pluto who releases the Kraken. That's why that is significant. You know, the solar system is flat, but Pluto is like 17 degrees below the ecliptic plane, so it represents the underworld. And by the way, Pluto was discovered in 1930. Yeah, 1930. April 20. Okay, yeah, in Arizona. So, yeah, Pluto was discovered in 1930. And the dog Pluto from Mickey came out in 1930. So now you got Pluto the dog and Pluto the planet, both showing up in 1930. Now take a look at this. On the side of Pluto, you literally have Pluto's face. Not a coincidence. I have many examples. I say that we live in a Disney universe. We're on planet Netflix, City of Gotham, and other fictional universes overlapping with this. But this is just one example. One more example of how we're in the Disney universe. Doesn't Disney own Star Wars? So Darth Vader is a representative of Saturn in the astrotheological context. Saturn's moon, Mimas, looks exactly like the Death Star. Another direct connection. We have many more. I can point out Game of Thrones. Now this is deep, because you have the House of Stark. And the House of Stark is the Iron Throne. And Mars is associated with the metal iron and the color red. So Tony Stark is Iron Man. So you got Tony Stark, Iron Man, House of Stark, Iron Throne. But then on the planet Mars, you have the symbol for the House of Stark. As well as, I think, yeah, here it is. I have to pull it up. There's a couple examples. The Game of Thrones on Mars. And there's one other one. Oh yeah, there's the starship, the Star Trek logo. The Star Trek emblem is also on Mars. So here, NASA finds Star Trek logo on Mars, and then Musk comes out with the Starship. Starfleet logo on Mars. And then you have the House of Stark Wolf's Head on Mars. But anyway, these are just a few examples of the tie-ins between outer space. And it's beyond just these surface things. Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, their whole relationship, the severing of Luke's sword hand. Yeah, that's all out of the myth of Osiris. J5 says, is Pluto a pancake or a sphere? I don't think you could have a pancake planet. I mean, I guess you could. They have found flat objects in space. I mean, if you look at space news, I believe I saw flat planet. There's like ravioli-shaped planets. Like, but as far as like the flat Earth concept, there is no possibility in which Earth is flat and it's in space. It doesn't make any sense. If you're saying the Earth is flat, it's because you haven't seen evidence of a curve and you don't trust what you've seen on TV. And if you haven't seen evidence of a curve, then you have no evidence that there's anything beneath you. So you can't even start with Earth is an object. If Earth is not a ball, then our starting point has to be, is it even an object discretely floating in space? Or are we at the bottom of some infinite flat universe? I mean, you would have to really start with exploration first, but the idea of a disk in space is a non-starter. Wouldn't make any sense. So I think you have a stronger case for space is fake than Earth is flat, if you want to go off of what we can observe. And when we say space is fake, we're not in denial of what's up, but the concept of space as presented is fake. Like, is space all around us and all around the ball that we're on? Or is space just up? And then what's below, of course? Are we at the bottom? Is there emptiness below us? Are we on a moving object or is it a stationary plane? All interesting questions. I'm also fond of pointing out the fact that the solar system's flat, galaxies are flat, the universe is flat. So flat's the rule. But it's almost immaterial here because people will say, well, what's at the edge of the Earth if it's flat? Well, what's at the edge of the universe? Because it's flat. What's at the edge of your universe? Nothing. I don't know. Well, what's the difference between your I don't know and the I don't know of somebody suggesting that the Earth isn't a ball? It just means that you happen to think that we've discovered a lot more and we have more answers than we do, which it may be true, but the idea of the flat Earth has always, I think, been questioning the sources from where we get our information. It shouldn't be hard to test. In fact, in a few weeks, we have some flat earthers going to Antarctica, and they're going to take a look to see if there is a 24-hour sun. If there is, then you'll have to really come up with something creative to walk away from that saying the Earth isn't a spinning ball. But even if you conclude, well, therefore, this is the best model at the moment, spinning ball, you're still left with a bunch of terrible CGI. So what are they hiding? Like, if you're able to prove it's a ball from here on Earth, it doesn't mean that what they purport to be from outer space is therefore from outer space. Kiddo Core says, try to imagine infinite space. I just say infinite till proven otherwise. Like, I'm happy whatever this place is. If there's more land, dinosaurs on other continents, giants, or just people that hate us and we're on quarantine, that's fine with me. Or if it is a ball, that's fine with me. My focus right now is on worldview and how we even get our cosmography if we can't trust the people who provide the content. And why don't we trust them? Well, because they augment what they show us with special effects, because they use special effects in Photoshop. And even though they've been called out consistently now for like 10 years, hey, show us something convincing. They haven't. In fact, their special effects have degraded. That's something too. The special effects have degraded. They haven't improved. They've introduced new things to make it more realistic, but they've been failing badly. Augmented virtual reality glitches, microphones going through necks. They just have been stuck, like 2015 era special effects. My third eye says, the Kabbalah suggests the earth is like an open space inside the creator. Fascinating. Yeah, I'm not really sure. I don't think that we're in a static universe of discrete objects floating around and that we're intelligent apes with big egos on top of it trying to cope with the meaninglessness of it all. I do think that it makes more sense to me. And I'm not a physicist, don't take my word for it, but I'm kind of the opinion now that the universe doesn't exist until we experience it and that it isn't separate from us. But I can't prove that. But it is the best explanation I have to accommodate the seeming cybernetic system that we're in and the role of synchronicity. And meaning itself, I'm just saying maybe it's made out of information. Maybe we're perceiving and creating simultaneously, and that it's some kind of I'm not going to say collective hallucination, but all right, I think we've been pretty productive today. Earlier, we did have a chat in Discord, which I recorded, and we'll be uploading it very soon. So if you missed that, you'll be able to hear it on the replay. Largely, the conversation today has been about predictive programming and why. Because a lot of people caught up behind wrong explanations represents a lot of, I would consider, it's a surplus that's not being tapped into. It's basically it's a research pool that's been misdirected. It's kind of stagnant. And I'd like those who are looking at this from different angles to essentially see if their model is superior to or a better explanation than what we're proposing here with this Metascript concept. And I welcome the debate and conversation because it's a win-win situation. One of us is right, one of these models is correct, one is not. And as soon as we're all on the same page, we can all focus on getting the answers. And part of getting the answers is being open to getting the answers that you didn't expect, to proving yourself wrong. And if you can't prove yourself wrong, if no new information can change your perspective, well, then you're not being very objective or scientific about it. And yeah, please prove me wrong on anything. I look forward to it. Prove me wrong because it saved me a lot of time. And it's very educational to learn how you're wrong. Like I learned I was wrong about a lot of things. And the process is, I think it's just very valuable. All right, this is Chief Crow. Where's the curve? Thanks for joining. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow on 11/22. Should be an interesting day. Gladiator 2 comes out. Marilyn Manson, One Assassination Under God. And it's the anniversary of Leave the World Behind.
Upside